Senate Majority Leader Amy Koch is here now to talk a little bit more about those budget negotiations. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin with the big picture. Governor Dayton characterizes a $34 billion budget as not reflective of Minnesota's values. Your caucus, of course, disagrees. How do you see a $34 billion budget and its priorities panning out?
Sure. Well, I mean, the budget that we passed, the $34 billion budget, is the largest budget in the state's history. And so I completely disagree with the governor, obviously. I think it is absolutely reflective of our values. Within that budget, we prioritized. There's an additional almost $450 million to K-12 education. There's an additional $600 million in health and human services, and that is over and above the last biennium. So the last budget cycle around, there's almost $1 billion in additional money to those areas, but that required some trade-offs, and Minnesotans understand that. And so there are some reductions, but we tried to mitigate those reductions with some reforms. And so if we had to put some more money into K-12, then we said, well, we're not going to just put more money in and spend it the same way. We're going to look at ways to close the achievement gap, which is incredibly important to Minnesotans, and we're going to look for ways to spend that money better. That's what Minnesotans asked us to do. That's what Minnesotans have been doing in their very own budgets. You look across the state, and most families are living this budget, depending on if you count in the one-time money. If you count in the one-time federal money, it's a 6% increase. If you count in the one-time federal money and the shift, it's even. We've held spending flat. Most Minnesota families and businesses have had their earnings stay flat if they're lucky. Many of them have seen them go down. And so to ask state government to do the same, just to say, hey, you've got a 6% increase, or at the very worst, you're spending flat, I don't think that's unreasonable to ask. And have costs gone up in certain areas? Yes. But so gas is up for people, grocery costs are up for families, and yet they're trying to figure out how to prioritize, how to change how they spend their money, and that is exactly what we're doing within this budget. So I think it is completely reflective of Minnesota values.
So let's talk a little bit about the budget negotiations. In an offer made on Wednesday, both you and Speaker Zellers characterized it as disappointing. Was there anything inside that package that could maybe lead to a final resolution?
You know, I think there are bits of it, and there are parts of it that we have proposed back, and so we're going to keep working on that. But, you know, I tell you what, it's a little disappointing, Julie, at this point for me. We are the only state that has now gone into government shutdown. 49 out of 50 other governors have figured out how to get a budget deal done. And these are governors that are faced with mixed legislatures. In New York, Governor Cuomo closed a $10 billion budget with a Republican Senate. In North Carolina, it's a Democrat governor, and it's a Republican House and Senate, and their budget is done. So I think it is time to ask the CEO, the governor of our state, to step up and lead. He needs to show us a path. He needs to give us his plan. We are in shutdown now. It is unacceptable. It is unnecessary. We have a budget that is, as I said, is a 6% increase in spending, and doesn't increase taxes, and it has the votes to pass. The governor can sign that bill, or he needs to have a plan of something that we can pass.
I want to touch upon something that you just talked about, some of the other states that found a way to resolve their budget issues. What are some of the factors you think are unique in Minnesota that have led us to this point, to a shutdown?
You know, I don't know that we're unique. I think that Minnesota is facing the same issues that every other state is facing. We're facing a competitiveness from other countries. We're facing competitiveness from other states. We're facing deficits, which most other states have faced. We've got mixed legislature, and we've got Democrat governor and a legislature that is Republican. That's not unusual in other states. So I guess the argument that I'm making is we're not any different, and there's no need to be in shutdown. And I think folks just have to ask, you know, what is the plan? You know, Governor Dayton, what is your plan for taking us out of this? We were the one state that had state parks closed for the 4th of July. It was not necessary. A deal could have been had. A deal in that bill could have been passed. A lights-on bill could have been passed. There are many options to the shutdown, and yet what we need is the governor to step up and lead.
And we are where we are now, in shutdown mode, as you have said. So let's going back to the offer on Wednesday. Are you supportive of, for example, the healthcare surcharges, or your original offer had a school shift? Would you make that amount higher if necessary.
No, the governor actually, we had offered a very small shift, and then the governor kind of came in with this 50-50 idea. We scaled that back in another offer, so we've gone back and forth on that. There's concerns with that, and so we're very careful of that. It's one-time money. It's not anything that we would prefer to do. I expect that it's not something that the governor prefers to do, but it may or may not be part of a final package. I think the biggest key that I'm looking for is the governor has offered, his offer still includes $1.4 billion in additional spending. $1.4 billion on top of the largest general fund budget in the state's history. And so that's just not realistic. That's not reflective of Minnesota values, and we need to see something happen with that number. We did not we offered some additional revenue to the governor, but $1.4 billion is not going to fly.
Okay, now you personally felt it was important for your caucus members to be out in the community over the 4th of July weekend. We were talking a bit about that, and talk with their constituents. So what did you hear from your constituents, and did you find it challenging at all to be meeting with them and discussing this with them?
And I'd like to spend a lot more time at home. I'm finding that with my new position, that's not happening nearly as much as I would like. But no, I find what my caucus found is largely positive. People are frustrated, and I tell you, my members are frustrated. They want to have this solved. They would come back and do a lights on bill. They'd like to come back and pass individual bills. They would like to get a deal done, and that is reflected in the offers that we've made to the governor. But overall, they heard from a lot of folks that are still, they get it. They're concerned about the spending, and they were saying, hang tough. We want you to get the best deal possible for us. We're not interested in out of control state spending. We can't afford it any longer, and so we want you. We understand what you're doing, and we support you.
And the DFL contends it's hearing basically the same message. So at what point do those messages maybe be not necessarily pushed aside, but minimized a bit to try to get a deal done?
Well, and that's what you saw. I mean, the Thursday night, you saw a big move on the part of the Republican caucuses. In fact, I think for a lot of folks, it was a surprisingly big move, and yet the governor walked away from the table. So now. That's difficult. That's difficult, and that's why I continue to say the governor needs to look at what was offered. He needs to understand what we've been saying for 6 months. No surprise. He needs to look at the budget we've passed and the priorities that we reflect in that, and then he needs to come up with a plan. Something that we can all not necessarily be happy with, but something that we can agree on.
And Madam Leader, let's talk real quickly about an independent commission appointed at the beginning of the week by former Governor Carlson, Vice President Mondale. They're expected to release a third budget plan. How open are you and your caucus to considering portions, if not all, of what comes out of that plan?
Sure. Well, if tax increases come out of that plan, that's not going to happen. But I am happy to listen to anyone with any ideas, and obviously, there's some very esteemed and knowledgeable people on that commission. So, we'll see what ideas they come up with, as I would listen to any Minnesotan. And so, but ultimately, at the negotiation table needs to be the governor, the Speaker of the House, and myself, and then we have the job of getting the votes that will pass whatever budget we come up with. But happy to have their suggestions.
All right, so Madam Leader, my last question for you is, as you mentioned earlier, some Minnesotans are very frustrated with what's going on. So here's your chance to talk to your constituents statewide. What do you want them to know right now?
Well, I want them to know, I think the most important thing is that none of this is necessary, that we're ready, we're here, we've been here for 6 months working. I think it's important for people to understand that the one person that can call us back is the governor, and we continue to entreat him to call us back, because constitutionally, if I could call the Senate back, I would call them back tomorrow, and I would pass the lights on bill at the very minimum. I would pass another 9 budget bills, and I would ask and push the governor to sign those, but I can't. And so I think it's important for people to understand that. I would also, I appreciate their frustration. I share their frustration, and we're going to continue to work on it. And that is the spirit in which the compromises that we've offered have been offered.
And more compromises down the road? Do you anticipate?
I know that whatever the solution is will absolutely be a compromise. I understand that, and my members understand that.
Okay, Madam Leader, thank you so much for joining us today.
Julie.